Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to TBR's webinar, Customers are Balancing Prevention and Protection in Security Spending Decisions, with TBR Senior Analyst Jane Wright. I'm Allison Crawford, and I'm hosting today's webinar. For years, compliance and governance requirements in an age of commodity malware attacks influenced organizations' security deployments. Today, the need to block advanced and targeted attacks is an increasingly important driver in IT security purchasing decisions, especially as C-level executives are displaying a greater willingness to invest in security solutions that will keep their organizations off the front page of media-reported breach events. TBR's research revealed many organizations are expanding their IT security budgets and authorizing net new spending on advanced threat protection products and services while maintaining investments in legacy malware prevention solutions. Over the next few minutes, we'll discuss these trends in more detail. But before I pass this over to Jane, there are a few housekeeping items I'd like to cover. First, we'll be recording today's session and posting it on our YouTube site, TBRI channel. We encourage you to visit our channel to watch this presentation or any of the others that we've posted. Second, we'd like to hear your opinions and thoughts on the materials we're presenting. Please send any questions or comments to the Q&A or chat function. We'll address them at the end of the webinar, or if you'd like to set up a private discussion for more detailed conversation, please reach out to any one of us to set up that conversation. Third, we'll send out the slides to everyone registered for today's webcast within 24 hours of the conclusion of the presentation. You can also find these slides as well as other thought leadership pieces, webinar decks, and commentaries on our SlideShare account at www.slideshare.net/TBR_market_insight. And again, we share all these social media links with you again at the end of our presentation. Now let me introduce you to Jane Wright. As a senior analyst in TBR's computing practice, Jane is a team lead for data center and information security research. Jane is also a lead on TBR syndicated reports, which highlight market trends and competitive positioning, and she manages customer engagements that result in actionable insights for TBR clients. Prior to joining TBR, Jane was a senior analyst covering information security at Enterprise Strategy Group. She was a research director at Gartner for more than a decade and began her career with positions at IBM and Digital Equipment. Jane holds a BS from Boston College and an MBA with a concentration in technology management. And with that, let me hand this over to Jane.
Thank you, Allison. Here's the agenda that we'll be talking about today. You'll see that we're going to focus our discussion on how customers are spending their money, their security budgets, in a number of different areas that you see mentioned here. Prevention and protection, which we're also calling detection and response technologies, as well as their spending between in-house deployments and solutions that they choose to deploy as they manage their hosted security service. The key thing I'm going to show you today is where the dollars are moving. So not just where customers are actually spending right now, although they did tell us about that, but also where they're planning to spend their dollars next year and the reasons for this movement. So first, let me give you a little background on our survey. TBR conducted a survey at the very end of 2014 where we reached out primarily to CISOs and also other CIOs responsible for security decisions to ask them about their spending for security solutions. We reached out to CISOs and CIOs working at small, medium, and large organizations, and that's why we call this our enterprise security spending study. That is, we did not cover consumer security. We limited this particular survey to the US, and we had 150 respondents who fell out into these industries that you see here primarily. So with that background, let me start to tell you about some of our findings. The first finding relates to how customers are balancing their spending between prevention-oriented products and services and protection or detection and response products and services. And so here on slide 5, you see a little bit of an explanation of each of them on the bottom. Generally speaking, prevention-oriented solutions are those designed to block known commodity malware, and detection response or protection solutions are designed to block unknown, targeted, persistent, zero-day threats, those kinds of products and services. So we asked respondents to tell us, what are you spending, what are you buying, who'd you buy it from, and do you consider each of those solutions that you, the respondent, just mentioned, do you consider that to be primarily for purposes of prevention of known malware or for the protection against targeted and persistent attacks, detection and response? Here's what we found out. Customers in 2014 spent the same portions of their security budgets on prevention as they did on detection and response, and that number was 31%. So they told us they're spending 31% on prevention-oriented products and services, and 31% also on detection and response products and services. And by the way, the remainder was for other expenses such as security staff salaries, things like that. So that was interesting enough, but here's what really gets interesting. So we asked them, okay, that's fine. What are you going to do in 2015? And not surprisingly, they told us they're going to increase their spending in these areas, but they're going to increase it in prevention-oriented solutions more than detection response. Now, it wasn't very significant of a difference, but generally speaking, they told us they're going to grow their spending in prevention-oriented solutions by, I believe it was 3%, and their spending on detection and response by only 1%. And we'll get into in a moment the reasons for this, but I just want to call this to your attention because this has great implications for security vendors such as yourselves. I know that so many of you are making significant investments, primarily through development, some through acquisitions, to expand your portfolios for those detection and response products and services. And that's a great thing because clearly customers are evaluating and considering detection response solutions. However, what our study shows is that the payoff for those investments isn't going to come that quickly, not in 2015. In 2015, the growth in customer security budgets is mostly going to be given over to the prevention-oriented solutions, which in many cases might be considered a legacy solution. So that's very important to keep in mind as you're planning your deployments, your investments in future technologies. Let's delve into that just a little bit further. We asked customers, okay, great, you told us about your spending prevention and also for detection response, but within those categories, are you going to be placing that, are you going to be looking for solutions that go on your network devices, on your endpoints, or other such as more server or database-oriented security solutions? And as you can see here, they're planning to spend most of their 2015 security threat management budgets, be it prevention or detection response, products or services, they're planning to mostly deploy it on the network. 40% of it will go to network-based solutions. Now, this won't surprise you because, historically, this is very true of the security market. Customers tend to deploy things first on the network, and frankly, a lot of security personnel came out of network jobs years ago. So this finding shows us where spending is going to be placed within the infrastructure. Within that, I want to give you a little bit more of a fine-tuning to these numbers. This network-based spending growth is going to primarily be based on detection and response technologies. In other words, customers who told us that they're spending on network-based solutions are planning to increase their network-based detection and response a little bit more than they're going to increase their network-based preventative solutions. And so vendors that have a strong selection of network-based detection and response will be able to capture that growth. And here I'm thinking of things like vendors like FireEye with NX, Cisco SourceFire with AMP for networks, and Trend Micro with Deep Discovery and Spectre. Then we turn to the customers to ask about their endpoint-based spending. And we asked, well, are you going to mostly be increasing your endpoint-based spending on prevention or detection and response. And in this case, we heard the opposite. They said we're actually going to be growing our traditional malware prevention spending on our endpoints. We're not going to be rushing to put advanced detection response on our endpoints quite as quickly. So vendors that have a strong set of offerings for prevention-oriented solutions on the endpoint, be they products or services, will do well here to be able to capture this growth. And here we're thinking about Kaspersky Endpoint Security for Business, or KESB, Sophos Endpoint Antivirus, solutions like that. This helps you understand where the particular growth in spending will be coming in 2015. And why is this growth happening? Let's look first to why are customers planning to increase their spending around traditional malware prevention solutions, traditional network firewalls, endpoint antivirus scanning. What are the really reasons for that increase? And in this case, the increase is all about the economy is getting better. Now remember, this is a US-based study, so we're definitely influenced by that. And the economy, by many measures, is improving in the US, and businesses are expanding accordingly. They're hiring more people, they're giving them more laptops, they're rolling out more workloads, so they need more servers to support them. And so they have this expanding infrastructure, and they are putting their preventative solutions that they know and love on all that increased population of devices and infrastructure. Vendors that are positioned to grow in this area would be vendors such as Symantec and Checkpoint, who have those very extensive portfolios in preventive security solutions. Now, if we look at the right-hand side, we do see that to some extent, customers told us that they are planning to decrease, some customers told us they are planning to decrease their preventive security spending a little bit. And so we did ask them, well, what's the reason for that? And here we see a little bit of a shift to those advanced tools, meaning the advanced threat detection response tools. But do keep in mind, this was a very small percentage of our respondents. I want to emphasize that we do not see advanced threat detection and response solutions cannibalizing the prevention-oriented market segment at this time. Most customers told us they are growing their security budgets, generally about 10% into 2015. And so that growth is going to mostly go to prevention, but some of the growth is going to go to advanced threat detection and response. If anything is going to shrink, it's that spending in the other bucket, those other expenses. So you don't need to worry about cannibalization. So we looked at increases in prevention-oriented spending, and we see that it's primarily about businesses, customers' businesses are growing. Now let's look at increases in detection and response spending, because it's a whole different game here. We asked customers, why are you increasing your spending in detection and response? And sure enough, the number one reason, no surprise here, is they feel they're being attacked more frequently, or certainly targeted for attacks and more advanced attacks more frequently, so clearly they are looking for greater solutions to protect them in that changing landscape. But look at the reasons number 2 and 3, executive mandates and reputation protection. Customers told us that they are generally being simply mandated by their executives, high-level executives and board members, to increase their spending for advanced threat detection and response, to keep their company off the front page of the Wall Street Journal for another breach, to protect their reputation. To protect their reputation with their customers, with their suppliers, with their business associates. So what this means is that the conversation that you, as vendors offering advanced threat protection response, detection response, the conversations in this case will need to be very business focused. You need to be speaking and messaging to the executives, business executives, board members about addressing their fear of damage to their reputation. It's a very different discussion. Now, there are some customers who told us they actually are planning to decrease their spending in advanced threat detection and response. And when you look at the first reason there, it really shows a concern. They told us, well, we're backing off because we're waiting for more proof that these solutions work. And what this tells us is that some customers tried the detection response solutions, perhaps from a startup vendor maybe a couple of years ago, and felt that they weren't working well. Now, I'm not saying they were the fault of the solutions. It could have been the customer's own skill sets. But in any case, there was a problem in them getting the benefits from those solutions, so they're backing off for a while. While, reason number two, they're waiting for established vendors. Some customers told us that they had tried startups, but they are really now waiting to see, they know that they're more established, mature vendors are rolling out more advanced threat detection and response technologies and solutions, so they're waiting to evaluate more of those. Now, similarly, and then there's also a little bit more of an IT-oriented conversation that vendors will need to have here, because customers told us that they are lacking an ROI justification method for advanced threat detection and response. So if you can just hand them that justification method to use, they will be very grateful to have that as a starting point. And they're looking for a little bit more cost justification on those advanced threat detection and response. Takeaway here for the established vendors is that, as we've seen, some of the established vendors have already rolled out very strongly defined advanced threat detection response, and here I'm thinking about IBM's offering from last May. And others have pre-announced their plans to help customers see their roadmaps, such as Symantec's announcement last week of 3 new ATP solutions. And these will help vendors position themselves for customers' plans for advanced threat detection and response in 2015. Now let's take another look at the market. I talked to you earlier about, we'd be talking about prevention versus detection response. And I also told you, though, we'll look at the spending for customer deployments versus managed or hosted security services, or security as a service. So we asked customers, what did you spend and what are you going to spend? And what they told us is, in 2014, they spent 57% of their threat management budgets on solutions they deployed in-house, and 43% on solutions that they opted to have deployed as a managed security service for them. And tellingly, they said 2015, that's not going to change that much. They're basically going to keep that balance the same. Now, this is a little bit of a different change than what you would have seen a few years ago. Around, say, 2011, spending for managed security services was growing kind of rapidly, and the reason for that primarily back then was that we really saw a real peak in security skills shortages a few years ago. Customers just couldn't get the people and couldn't keep the people who had the right skills, so they were turning to managed security service providers for partly to augment their staff. Now in 2014-15, there's still a skills shortage, but it is leveling off a bit. And so at the same time, customers are leveling off their plans to deploy so much outsourced to a managed security service provider. So this is going to level off in 2015. That's an important consideration for vendors such as yourselves who may be considering expanding resources in SOCs just to run your managed security services. You may want to consider this growth, this flat growth in managed security services, and maybe make your investments a little more flexible by instead supporting more MSSP partners who can deliver those solutions as a service for you. Let's just take the last two slides to dive into that managed security services a little bit further. We asked customers who told us that they have paid for managed security services to tell us first in the prevention bucket, what types of tasks did you outsource to your MSSP? Be it the vendor acting as their own managed security service provider or to an MSSP partner of a vendor. And here you see in order of frequency, on slide number 10, the tasks that they have mostly outsourced. So number one, and frankly it was number 1 and 2, we put them together, was network firewall monitoring and network firewall management. They are still the most requested song in the MSSP repertoire. Coming right up though at number 2 now is mobile security management. Now this is just a volume play. Customers have seen such growth in mobile devices that they need to secure, and they are just opting to outsource that volume task to managed security services providers. So here we'll see vendors that are positioned to offer network firewall monitoring management do well to continue to capture that large share of the market, and that would be folks like IBM and SilverSky. And for mobile security management, it would be vendors such as AT&T who have really focused in that area for managed security services. Finally, let's look at the advanced threat detection response tasks that customers are opting to outsource to an MSSP or to a vendor offering security as a service. Once again, the network rises to the top, everything starts at the network, and customers are primarily outsourcing network-based threat monitoring and management to service providers. And so one offering that comes to mind right there is FireEye as a service, clearly. But here is a great opportunity. There aren't many offerings here yet. There simply are not many advanced threat detection and response network-based as a service offerings in the market at this time. And so it's a great opportunity for vendors to expand into this space and capture that top requested outsource task. The second most requested area in advanced threat detection response outsourcing is endpoint threat monitoring. And so this might be an area where you might see Cisco with SourceFire expand and for endpoints through more MSSP partners. And we also see other vendors here that have established themselves, such as Dell SecureWorks with AETD and Symantec with the MSSP ATP offering that they announced in last year. So that's kind of the highlights of our spending study, and I want to go ahead and open this up to any questions you may have. Allison, I'll pass it back to you.
Sorry, Jane, I'm just getting that right now. Hold on one second. So the first question we had, when it comes to customer executives deciding that the company is going to invest in advanced threat detection and response, is there any variation based on company size? Excuse me. Are the executives at smaller or larger companies more involved in advanced threat protection spending decisions?
Yeah, we did see that. So we definitely saw more executive involvement in the larger organizations compared to medium and small organizations. It was more likely the large organizations they actually said it was their #1 reason. Executive mandate was their #1 reason for increasing their spending on detection and response. So if we looked at the entire population respondents overall, that was executive mandates was the #2 reason. But if we looked at just our large customer, large enterprise respondents, executive mandates was their #1 reason.
Okay. We had a question on clarifying which size, oops, sorry, that just jumped, Which size, type, and vertical did you interview?
Okay, so for sizing, we interviewed customers, organizations with between 250 and 1,000 employees. We consider those small. Medium, we did 1,000 to 5,000 employees, and large were 5,000 or more employees. And we spread our survey fairly evenly amongst those three sizes. And we let natural fallout occur amongst all industries. We did not quota on industries for the survey because we were more focused on getting a good selection of small, medium, and large. But as it happened, we did get a lot of respondents in financial, manufacturing, and let me think. I think those are the two that come to mind that we got a good number of respondents in those areas.
Okay. Another question, looks like the only question we have in queue right now. How much of a role does compliance play in the decision to use managed security services versus running security in-house?
Oh, good. So compliance, and how does it impact the use of managed security services? That was very interesting. When we asked customers, I didn't show it in the study, in the presentation, but we asked customers, why are you using managed security services at all? So not just for what tasks, but for what business reason did you choose to outsource instead of doing it yourself? So the first couple of reasons were all based on that skills shortage that I had mentioned to you. They said, well, we just don't have the skills, or we can't keep the people. But once we got past those people reasons, the third reason was compliance. That customers feel that they're not sure they'll be fully compliant unless they outsource to an MSSP who can help them ensure that they are compliant for their industry regulations. So compliance is very important. And here's something else. The frequency of attack did not correlate to the use of managed security services. So let me say that again. Customers didn't say, well, we were attacked more frequently, so therefore we expanded our spending in managed security services. That wasn't the case. There was no correlation there. It was really more compliance is still much more of a driver for managed security services spending.
Okay, we had another question come through. There seemed to be a trend on detective controls such as AV based on a per asset protected measure. For example, AV spending per PC going down, but going up overall.
We did not question that, so I could not give you a specific answer in that way. I'm trying to think. So your question is, are customers spending more on AV for PCs and Macs versus for mobile? And we'd have to confirm this with data, but my feeling from conversations I've had is no. Customers are still very concerned about wrapping that AV around every endpoint, be it a PC or a Mac or a mobile. And in fact, we're seeing a little bit of a resistance of investing too much in mobiles because customers still aren't quite feeling that they're putting the most sensitive data on their mobile devices, or that they're letting employees pass that sensitive data through their mobile devices.
Okay. Yeah, there was a clarification, but I think you answered that. So I'll follow up that person offline. So we don't have any other additional questions in queue right now. So with that, unless there's any other pressing questions that anybody has, that's to wrap things up. So I want to thank everybody for attending the event today and for your questions, and thanks to Jane for the presentation. As you mentioned, excuse me. Oh God, the Boston cold come around. As I mentioned, there's the social media links. If anybody would like to follow Jane or TBR on Twitter, you can do that here, as well as join the conversations on SlideShare, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And although we don't have it here, I do encourage people to reach out to Jane directly on LinkedIn and to join her network, as she is putting some of her thoughts and research out on LinkedIn as well. So I do encourage anybody who wants to work more closely with Jane to do that. On the way out of the webinar, there's going to be a short survey, 3 quick questions. How valuable was the content of the webinar, how good was the presenter, and if there's any other open-ended feedback you want to share. Since this is a new program, we want to make sure that we are bringing you guys value, not only in the research, but in the webinars as well. So if you have things that you think you want to hear us cover in more detail or in less detail, we do look forward to that conversation, that information from you to be able to put that into our research quarter to quarter. So with that, I'm going to shut everything down. So I want to thank everyone for your time today. And if you have any additional questions, please do feel free to reach out to myself or to Jane directly and set up those conversations. Thanks again, everyone, and have a great afternoon.